Good day, dear students. In today's lesson, we will cover the idea of using passive statements in the present perfect tense. This topic is relevant to Unit 10 and Unit 11 of your Oxford Discover 6. Before we come to the main idea, I'd like you to understand that verb can change itself into 5 different forms. These forms are infinitive or the base form, present or the V1 form, past or the V2 form, participle or the V3 form, and the present participle or the ing form. I will use 2 different types of verbs. The first form of kind of verb is the regular verb. Regular verbs do not change their spellings as they move from one form to the other. So, in the infinitive form, it will be to cook. In present form, it will be cook or cooks. In the past form, the verb will be cooked. And in the participle form, it will be cooked. And in the ing form, it will be cooking. Go, on the other hand, is an irregular verb. An irregular verb is the one that changes its spellings as it moves from one form to the other. So, to go changes into go or goes, went, gone, going. To be. Now, be is an important verb. Why? Because it represents many other verbs or form of verb. In the present form, be stands for am, is, are. In the past form, it represents was and were. In the participle form, it represents been. And in the present participle form, it represents being. I hope this concept is absolutely clear. In today's lesson, we will be focusing mostly on this V3 form of the verb. Present perfect. How do we make the present perfect tense? We add the subject, then we use has or have, then we use verb in its participle or the V3 form. We use have with pronouns I, you, we, they, or with plural nouns. When your subject is a plural noun or it is the pronoun I, you, we, they, we use the helping verb have. On the other hand, if your subject is singular noun or the pronoun he, she, it, we use the helping verb has. For example, John has kicked the ball. In this example, has kicked is your present perfect tense. Now, what is John and the ball? If has kicked is the verb, that is the action which is taking place, who is performing the action? It is John. John has kicked. Now, what has he kicked? The ball. So, we can say the ball is receiving the action. The performer of the action is called the subject. The one that receives the action is called the object. The action is called the verb. Such a sentence is called an active sentence or active statement. On the other hand, if I don't want to emphasize who has performed the action, if it is not important who has performed the action, what I will do is I will use the passive form of the sentence. How do we make a passive sentence? We have the subject, we add has or have, then we add been, then we add verb in its V3 or the participle form. For example, the ball has been kicked by John. What have we done? Remember, to change the sentence from active to passive, it is absolutely easy. Why? Because the object of the active statement becomes the subject of the passive statement. Whereas the subject of the passive statement becomes the object of the the subject of the active statement becomes the object of the passive statement. Whereas the verb comes down as it is only with the addition of the helping verb been. So, John has kicked the ball changes into the ball has been kicked by John. As I said earlier, when you convert a sentence from active to passive, that is when you do not wish to say who is the performer of the action. Or when you know who has performed the action, you remove the performer of the action and the sentence will still be complete. The ball has been kicked. We know who has kicked it. We know that it is John who has done the action. So, from John has kicked the ball, remember the object becomes the subject. Has kicked turns into has been kicked. Now that you have understood how an active statement changes into a passive statement, I will tell you the 4 different types of sentences. The first one is the affirmative. Affirmative sentences are the ones that we use every day, most of the time. Again, just like we have done earlier on, subject plus has have plus verb in its participle form in the active form, in the active sentence, and subject plus has have plus been plus verb in the passive form. John has kicked the ball. Object becomes the subject of passive. The ball has been kicked. It is not important to mention who has performed the action. In the negative statement, what we do is that subject plus has have plus not. Whenever you will have not in your sentence, we will call such a sentence as a negative sentence. Subject plus has have plus not plus verb in the participle form makes your active form of present perfect sentence. Subject plus has have plus not plus been plus verb in the participle form makes passive. John hasn't kicked the ball becomes the ball hasn't been kicked. The ball from active becomes the subject of passive. Okay? The ball hasn't been kicked. The sentence is a negative sentence. Next we have interrogative. Have you ever heard how policemen interrogate criminals? What do we mean by the word interrogate? Interrogate means to question someone. So, from the word interrogate, we have the word interrogative. So, an interrogative sentence means simply a question statement. Now, how do we make interrogative statements? In the active form, we use has have plus subject plus verb in its participle form. Whereas in the passive form, we use has have plus subject plus been plus verb in its participle form. So, the same example in the active form, interrogative statement, has John kicked the ball? See how the verb has divided into 2 portions and after has we have added the subject. Then the rest of the verb, then comes your object. Now we know that the object of active becomes the subject of passive. So, has the ball been kicked? Simple, passive, interrogative sentence. Remember, in the interrogative sentences, you must put the question mark because it is a question statement. Finally, negative interrogative. Has have plus not because it is negative. Subject plus verb in its participle form. And if you want to make the passive, has have plus not plus subject plus been plus verb. So, the same example in the negative interrogative will be, hasn't John kicked the ball? The object will become the subject of passive statement. Hasn't the ball been kicked? I hope you understand today's lesson. Thank you very much. Bless you all.